Y'all might have to give Skechers a chance. And this is my full review on the Skechers Aero Spark, which is one of Skechers' new daily trainers. This video is not sponsored in any way, shape, or form. I did buy this shoe with 100% of my own money, so let's get right into the review. So to start off with the Skechers Aero Spark outsole, we have a full-length Goodyear rubber coverage on the outsole. And honestly, from a traction point of view, I typically only ran on the road in pretty good weather conditions as I do live in Southern California. So my experience might be a little bit different than those of you who maybe run in the rain a lot more or maybe run in like snowy conditions or humidity a lot. But this rubber outsole did very, very well. I was sticking to the ground perfectly fine, especially in good weather conditions on cleaner roads. When I did run on this beach with a little bit of sand on the road, I was slipping a little bit, but then again, I slip in basically all shoes when I run on the road with a little bit of sand on it. So overall, the traction performance on the outsole, I mean, with Goodyear collaboration is kind of crazy for this price point. So I really liked it. I thought that it performed very well. Even if they covered the Goodyear symbol and I just saw this as a regular outsole, the pattern itself, as well as just the performance on the outsole, was really, really good. So overall traction on the outsole, at least in the weather conditions that I ran in them, as well as the pavement that I ran on, these were phenomenal. So moving on to the durability of this outsole. Now I do have about 30 miles in this shoe, and honestly it's holding up very, very well. Now there are some etchings that are starting to go missing on the forefoot, which I think is to be expected with most shoes, but I do think that since there is a pretty thick layer of outsole material on the bottom of the shoe, you are going to expect these to last a decent amount of time. Now obviously, just with 30 miles on the shoe, I'm not going to be able to really predict how long these shoes will last, but I do think that since it does have Goodyear rubber, I'd assume that, it's maybe a little bit above average compared to some of the other shoes on the market that just kind of use regular rubber. That might be due to a little bit of the marketing of that collaboration, but that's also my hypothesis. I do feel like this is a pretty durable rubber, just from the feel and the touch of it, and the traction performance is also really good. So overall, the outsole on the Skechers Aero Spark was very good. Now, moving on to the cushion setup of the Skechers Aero Spark. As you can see, we kind of have this translucent casing with a kind of like foam encased in it. It's called Hyperburst C or Hyperburst Ice. As you can tell, I'm not super familiar with Skechers performance technology, as I don't typically buy Skechers for performance running. And honestly, that might change with this performance of the shoe. So how did this shoe feel? I mean, it does have a decent amount of stack height in both the heel and the forefoot. I'm going to put the specs up here, as well as it does have a mini plate. I believe it's just like a torsional plate that's in the midfoot. So that didn't really affect too much of the shoe. I would still consider this pretty much a daily trainer that's non-plated. Kind of in the same category as maybe the Adizero Evo SL, because it doesn't have a full length plate, and I don't feel like the shoe is stiff enough to be considered plated in my experience. But let's talk about how the cushioning felt on foot. Now, I personally really, really, really enjoyed the cushion setup. I mean, branding aside, marketing aside, all this stuff, if you compare this shoe with a lot of other daily trainers at the same price point, I think this retails for $130. You are not going to get much better cushioning setups, in my opinion, for that price. Especially if you're buying all these shoes at full retail. You could probably find this shoe on sale already, and maybe you can compare them to other brands' shoes that are already on sale. But overall, I really, really enjoyed this cushion setup. And I think there was a comment on one of my past videos that said that this actually does use the same foam as the Brooks Glycerin Max, as well as the Brooks Glycerin 22. I'm not exactly sure, the validity and whatnot, but I really do believe that these feel exactly the same as Brooks's DNA tuned foam, and it does feel very nice underfoot. So it is a softer foam. With the amount of stack height that they have in the heel and the forefoot, though, of this specific model, I did feel that even though it was softer, there was nice ground feel, and I didn't feel like I was sinking into the shoe too much, kind of like the Brooks Glycerin Max. Since that shoe has such a higher stack, I feel like you are soaking into the shoe every single step that you take, and it's a little bit harder to pick up the pace. But with this lower stack height, I did feel like I was able to run a little bit faster in the shoe. I was able to run slower in the shoe. The transitions in the shoe, the way that the geometry is of the shoe, I really, really enjoyed. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Hoka Mach 6 as well, and I really love that shoe as well, where the geometry of the midsole and just the outsole and stuff, is maybe a little bit reminiscent. And I do like that the heel geometry of the midsole is very, I guess, flowy in the transition. So overall, I have nothing but good things to say about this cushion setup. If I were to nitpick on this cushion setup, I would say that maybe on my longer runs, maybe runs over, 10 miles or over 13 miles, I did feel like I needed maybe a touch more impact protection. But then again, too, like that's maybe a personal preference of mine. And that's with my luxury of having all these different shoes that I've ran in and I can compare them to. And I've honestly compared or thought in my head of comparing this shoe to a lot more expensive shoes than this was. But if that's also the only complaint of a daily trainer is that I can't run more than maybe like 15 miles in this shoe, I think that that's a fantastic kind of problem to have. And overall, with shorter runs and any run that's under that, I personally really love this setup, and I think that it feels a lot more premium than it's priced at. So overall, I would say that it is a softer setup. It's still pretty stable. It's nice and low to the ground. You have that ground feel. You're not absurdly taller in this shoe, which I think a lot of shoes nowadays really promote. It does feel like a premium cushion setup. You aren't going to get the most response from a bounciness point of view. So I still do think that Saucony's setup is a little bit more bouncy. Or Saucony's midsole materials are a little bit more bouncy, and maybe a couple of other shoes that I can't really remember off the top of my head. But this is a premium foam experience in my opinion, and it is on the softer side. But then again, like I said, since it does have a lower stack, you are getting that response in the sense of ground feel, and you're not sinking into the shoe too much before you can kind of get onto your next step. So overall cushion setup, if I had like a number system rating, I would say that this is like a 9 out of 10, especially thinking about the price of this shoe. So overall, I really enjoyed the cushioning, as you can probably tell. Now, moving on to the upper and the fit. Now, I thought that this upper was maybe not the downside of the shoe or the downfall of the shoe, but I did think that maybe it was the weakest part of the shoe, not even in the sense of comfortability, but in the sense of I just think that it's a little bit too much material for my liking. Now, it's not a bad setup whatsoever. I do feel like this shoe fit very well. First of all, I do have a wider than average foot, and I would say that I would recommend getting your true size in these. Even with my slightly wider than average foot, I did feel like the shoe fit phenomenally. It kind of fit like a sock, which I personally really like. It was maybe a little bit snug in the forefoot when I first took it out of the box, but as I broke in the shoe, the upper material as well as the fit kind of like started to lock in a little bit more and kind of conform to my foot. This material is kind of like a mesh slash knitted material, which I personally love. I just feel like it's a little bit thick for my liking, and if I'm really nitpicking, I think that the breathability could be a little bit better if this material was thinner or had more perforations. But overall, I think that the support that it provides you with as well as the fit is really comfortable. It kind of fits like a sock, like I said, and it is very comfortable when you tie the laces a little bit tighter. I will also say that the gusseted tongue in this shoe is kind of made of this like nubuck material or kind of like fake synthetic material. And I do think that it's a little bit on the thicker side. But then again, I am nitpicking. And when you put it on your foot and you just tie your shoes and stuff, it really doesn't affect it too much. It's more just so me nitpicking on the shoe. Heel lockdown was phenomenal. I had no problems with that. I didn't even have to do the runner's loop in this shoe. And I like I said, runs true to size. I think that the only complaints on this upper is that I wish that the material was a little bit more breathable, as well as I wish that the kind of padding within this upper wasn't so thick, just so that it would feel a little bit more like the Saucony Endorphin Speed 5 or maybe the New Balance Rebel V5, where you feel like you have nothing on your foot. I think like those uppers, I mean, those uppers do have their own problems, but if this upper was lighter, then and it had this setup at this price and also like, the outsole setup, wow, this would be probably confirmed top 5, especially for the price point of $130, which is what this shoe retails at. So overall, the fit and the upper were very good. If I were to nitpick, like I said, I wish that the materials were a little bit thinner and maybe a little bit more breathable, so the shoe overall would feel a little bit lighter weight. But nonetheless, it's still a great upper and great fitting shoe. So I personally overall really, really enjoyed this shoe. As you can kind of tell, I have been, in the past, like growing up, I never really looked at Skechers for performance shoes, whether that was in basketball, hiking, running, walking. I never really looked at Skechers twice, to be honest, but when I did see that they released a new performance running shoe lineup, and I kind of looked at the specs, kind of looked at like how the shoe looks, and it did kind of remind me, the midsole reminded me of Brooks DNA Tune foam. So if that is true that they are the same foam, it's insane value that you're getting with this shoe. You're basically getting a $160 to $170 setup in a $130 shoe. So you're basically getting premium cushioning at an entry level price, which in this day and age, come on, like you can't be mad at it. So if you are brand agnostic or you don't mind wearing Skechers, I know maybe it has a negative connotation, or I guess a negative brand perception, maybe amongst the younger crowd, or at least, the people maybe closer to my age. Then yeah, maybe you're gonna skip on these, or you're gonna ignore them, which is totally fine. It's, whatever you want to wear and whatever you want to buy. But in my opinion, if you don't care about brand and you only care about performance and price, I think that this shoe is definitely going to be hard to beat. It's one of actually my favorites that I've been really running in. I don't exactly know if it's going to sneak into my top 5 by the end of the year, because there are some shoes that I'm still anticipating. But this was definitely a big surprise to me. With me reviewing so many shoes, I just wasn't expecting such a banger from Skechers. And honestly, I might have to check out the other Skechers shoes that they have in their lineup. I believe it's like the Aero Burst and the Aero Tempo. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to get both, but we'll see about that. So I'm really excited. I hope Skechers keeps making these performance shoes. I think like more competitors amongst the brands just gets consumers better shoes, especially at better prices. That's going to pretty much conclude my Skechers Aero Spark review. As you can probably tell, I am a huge fan of the shoe. I love the price point. I love the technology. I love the way that the shoe fits and feels when I'm running and stuff. And I honestly think that if I close my eyes, I would think that I'm wearing a $140 to $150, maybe a more premium quote unquote running brand shoe. So that is my full review on the Skechers Aero Spark. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you stay tuned for future comparison videos. Let me know if you want me to compare this shoe to any of the other shoes that I currently have. I know you probably don't know what shoes I have, but if you look through my videos and you want me to compare this to the Nova Blast, the Adizero Evo SLs, whatever you want, we'll try to accommodate and try to post that video. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.